Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are on the record. Today is Wednesday, the 29th day of July in the year 2026. This is a budget hearing for the Department of Infrastructure with the Jersey City Municipal Council. We had a scheduled 1 p.m. start. The clock on my cell phone is showing 1:06 p.m. May we have a roll call for the commencement of this budget hearing? Councilperson Brooks is not here. Councilperson Zuper is not here. Councilperson Efros here. Councilperson Little
Here.
Councilperson Gilmore is here, but I'm going to mark him absent for now. We had a problem in the morning, but we'll sort it out. Councilperson Singh.
Here.
Councilperson Griffin is not here. Councilperson Lavaro is not here, and Council President Ridley.
I want to
Here.
very proudly that all four of us have attended all sessions, just four of us. So very
Well-
proud of this achievement.
The clerk will congratulate you on that. There is no awards for that, but I will recognize that you have perfect attendance on all budget hearings. And I see Councilperson Brooks arriving at 1:07 p.m. I don't have Gilmore too. It's okay. But we have now 5 council members present at 1:07 p.m. In addition, at its time for its preparation, the notice of this meeting was similarly disseminated on Thursday, July 23rd in the year 2026 at 1:32 p.m. to the mayor, municipal council, business administrator, corporation council, and local newspaper, so I can certify as to our total compliance with the Sunshine Law. Now I'm going to turn it over to Council President.
Good afternoon. This afternoon, we will review the Department of Infrastructure. This is our last budget hearing for what is now become round 1 of our budget hearings, as we have a few other departments to recap on. Hopefully, we'll get to those next week. But I want to thank the Infrastructure Department for being here today. And as with all of our budget hearings, we have a different council person lead each session. And I believe that this session is also being chaired today by our councilperson Little.
I am co-chairing with Councilman Efros.
Okay.
We have two chairs, twice the fun.
Just don't throw the chairs.
Infrastructure is a really important department with multiple divisions and a reasonably sized budget. So without further ado, I'd like to just get to it and thank you all for being here today. And I'm looking forward to your presentation and looking forward to hearing some answers to our questions as well. So thank you all for your work.
Save the best for last.
Director, if you just want to introduce everyone with you on your team, and then I'll have the camera on the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Clerk. First of all, I'm Andy Kaplan. I'm the Director of the Department of Infrastructure. Thank you. I am biased. I'm happy. I also think we saved the best for last, but let me just briefly introduce my team, and then we're excited to kind of have your interest in our department and a lot of the incredible work that I think we accomplish and the budget that we use to accomplish it. So to my left immediately is Drew, Deputy Director Drew Banghart of the overall Department of Infrastructure. And I also have our division leaders with us. On the end, I have Director Amanda Diamond of the Sustainability Division. To her right is Director Brian Weller of our Architecture Division. To his left is Doug Carlucci. Doug leads the traffic permitting group, and for the period where we haven't had a traffic engineer for the majority of this calendar year, has really kind of stepped up and done a lot of work for that division. And to his right is Director Peter Truch, who started this morning. So we are excited to have him, and over the next few weeks, hopefully an opportunity to meet the council persons. And he is a director of traffic engineering and has a strong background. We're excited to have him on the team. And then all the way on my right, our designated PowerPoint clicker is Director Lindsay Schofield of the Transportation Planning. So next slide, Lindsay. A little bit about what our team does. At a high level, the Department of Infrastructure is a group of project professionals, planners, engineers, landscape architects, project managers, who deliver and oversee a lot of the capital programming that we work on in our city. That includes our parks, our buildings, and our public right-of-ways or our streets. Because of that, we also have what I fondly think of kind of the Department of Transportation mandate. And that's really done between our traffic engineering and transportation plannings groups working closely together. Specifically, our traffic engineering group really looks at kind of the design and implementation of roadways, signals, signs, pavement markings, and advancing and implementing a lot of the work that transportation planning does in terms of envisioning Vision Zero, safety, equitable mobility, complete streets. Transportation planning also oversees the delivery of certain transportation services programs that the city has that include VIA and City Bike. Additionally, I mentioned architecture, right? Architecture and Brian's group really works to oversee a lot of the capital delivery portfolio at our parks and our buildings. We work closely with DPW and the Parks and Youth Development to make sure we understand what those needs are, get grants, and help to deliver capital improvements in them. Our engineering division, which currently we is a vacancy as a director, that's been a long-term vacancy and a challenge. That group is really meant to be the municipal engineer. They oversee the pavement management program, EDA, curb ramp compliance, environmental compliance with rules and regulations. They deliver a lot of the federal and state grants, and they also set design standards and engineering standards for the city. And then last but not least is our sustainability division, which oversees the green infrastructure, the urban forestry and tree planting program, as well as energy efficiency programs such as the EV on-street charging and the city kind of EV charging fleet program. And across all of these divisions, we also manage a large number of grants and other programs to really help leverage the capital investment across our city. Next slide, Lindsay. So a little bit of what we've accomplished in 2026 so far. I think the top line number that we want to really highlight, and this is a bit more kind of our mobility and streets related programs, although some of this crosses division in terms of delivery, is that we provided over 520,000, over 500,000 trips between January and June to residents of this city on these mobility programs, City Bike, VIA, and the Port Liberté Ferry. That is something that, we through contract management and oversight deliver more mobility options to our public directly, in addition to capital delivery. The other big area that mobility looks at, and this again extends across all of our divisions, is grant management. I actually think it might be a little bit higher, but right, we have more than $71 million of grants, federal, state, county open space trust, that have been given to the city to be managed and delivered. And it's a significant amount of money, and these projects last multiple years, but it's a very large portfolio that we have the responsibility to deliver, and that's really the goal of getting these grants, is to see these improvements out on the streets, out in the real world, benefiting the residents of Jersey City. Another key focus of the department has been Vision Zero, making our streets safer, and a lot of those capital programs will do that, but they take so long to deliver. We know there's an urgency and a mandate to provide safety improvements now. And that's where our Quick Build program, where we've committed to and have already started implementing over 100 safety improvements at over 80 locations throughout the city in the calendar year 2026. And we worked with a large number of council members' offices to help make sure that our priorities align with what their understanding of the community needs are, to help really shape that program. And one other accomplishment that I felt important to highlight is that we've updated our transportation master plan. This is a part of the overall city master plan. It'll be presented to the planning board this fall. And this is an element that's updated every 10, 15 years in our case, that really sets the vision of what transportation in Jersey City looks like long-term. And flowing out of that vision, it really helps to define certain standards, development goals, and other projects, and what we do when we implement how we use our public right-of-way in our street space. Some additional accomplishments in 2026. Our sustainability group has overseen over 90 tree plantings that were fully grant funded. They've also submitted grants for more tree plantings, right? Up to 500. Hopefully, we have high hopes that we'll get those grants. And again, that's a no match award. We've earned Tree City USA status and we're working to stand up an environmental justice task force in conjunction with the council, as well as community solar and a lot of other of these fantastic initiatives to help our city respond to some of the storms and some of the environmental changes and challenges that we face, especially in our infrastructure. Our architecture division has delivered a full capital portfolio. Of course, we're all limited in staffing, but especially our architecture division, especially infrastructure. They've still delivered park, playground, and historic preservation projects, including right now, active construction at Engine 10, as well as the Monticello Court. Our traffic engineering group, especially the permits division, has raised our permit fees to what was previously approved statutorily. And I think this is an old number, this is from June. We're on track to have a record amount of fees collected through our traffic permitting process. We've also brought in today a traffic engineer to lead this department to continue to grow its efforts in terms of implementing and enacting Vision Zero. And our engineering division has rebuilt over 70 intersection curb ramps to current ADA standards and is currently overseeing in conjunction, because we are understaffed, with all the other support of other staff, over $71 million worth of grant funding, as we mentioned. The next slide, this is what I really want to kind of explain. I think this kind of helps illuminate a lot of the numbers about our budget. This shows by our division, including the director's office as a standalone line, what is in the 2026 draft that's being presented to you. And for comparison, we're also showing it to the 2025 adopted draft, where it looks like there's pretty significant increases. But one of the biggest challenges that we've had is that in 2025, almost twice our on-paper budget were expenses that are OpEx expenses, but were paid out of capital. And I know this is not a unique story for this department, but I think the magnitude of this impacting the Department of Infrastructure is huge. So you can see in the column, the three columns on the right, I've included the amount of costs that were hidden in the capital budget. And this administration has moved them back in 2026 to the operating budget. We've also cut them down, but in order to really understand what this year's budget represents and compare it to what 2025 should have reflected in practice, by considering those operating expenses that were paid out of capital, we've shared that here. So that's listed here, and I'm happy to go through them. I think some of them are on the bottom of the slide here. But this reflects the true budget. And when we compare this with the capital being accounted for and operating, there's a reduction across every division. Despite, and I think we have some good arguments that we are already understaffed in terms of delivering some of the ambitious goals, some of the ambitious projects and programs. But we're still able to kind of reduce budgets, and we've done that by being very frugal and intentional stewards of the public money. The only exception to this and is the director's office, which has gone up nominally. And the reason for that is that there are some members of the director's office and unions who received a 3+% annual raise, which averages out to this. So it's not a very large number to begin with, but it's mostly salary, and that's where that all comes from. To highlight some of the items that were paid out of capital that are really operating expenses, in 2025, we spent over $600,000 for operating and maintenance contracts for the PJP landfill. That's the landfill that I think is envisioned to one day become Skyway Park under the Pulaski Skyway. It is a historic landfill that the city has ownership of. It is capped, and the liability of what's underneath that cap relies in the prior owner, but the city has the responsibility and legal obligation to ensure that that cap remains in place, to ensure that it's not leaching environmental problems, and there's monitoring wells, and there's an annual reporting of this city's property. And we accomplish those testing and accomplishments through a contract with a professional services firm. And that's the annual cost. It's an operating and maintenance cost. And it's something that we can't really avoid because we own this landfill property, and we are have legal responsibilities and ethical responsibilities to ensure its environmental stewardship of this site. Additionally, $300,000 was engineering on-call. Again, we will go into the org chart, but we don't have an engineer in the engineering division at the moment, a licensed professional engineers. And so we relied on some on-call services and professional services for being able to keep responsiveness. Additionally, we previously received bills for DEP permit fees, and we had those paid out of capital, which is not something that should happen. In the traffic engineering division, you'll see significant, almost over $4.75 million. And that includes signal maintenance contract. Those are traffic signals. Anytime there's a crash or an outage that impacts a signal, we have a 24/7 contractor who maintains, responds, fixes, and keeps the traffic signals operating and running. They also ensure annual inspections because these are considered life safety critical systems to prevent crashes and to be operational. Additionally, in here is the road striping contract. That's over $1.25 million, $1.3 million. And again, that is something, what we install can be counted towards capital, but there's a significant portion that is not. And one thing that's important to highlight is the difference between capital and operating, why this matters. Capital expenses can be bonded for and be paid back over a period of time. Operating expenses are meant to be things that really you pay for and last this year, maybe 2 years, but not long-term that you kind of take out a loan to pay for, like you would a building or something that's going to last a long time. So when we talk about how that applies to some of these contracts, like the striping contract is a good example. When we put down what's called EnduraBlend, which is like the colored pavement, those will last 5, 10 plus years. Those are eligible to be capital expenses. Things like delineators, things like line stripes, those have a life cycle cost of 3, right? So the engineering standard is that those are not capital expenses because they require maintenance and upkeep in a shorter time frame. Wanted to just kind of highlight that. Additionally, we have a contract with a doctor who reviews all of the ADA parking applications. So that's $50K, but that's was previously paid out of capital, but that's an operating expense. And then lastly, in the transportation planning group, we also had an on-call consultant, but we also had a $142,000 payment to City Bike. That was under a prior contract. We'll note that the City Bike contract was renegotiated and earlier this year was passed by council to no longer be at cost to the city. So that is no longer something that we expend starting in March. We do have a line item in our budget to pay for the cost of City Bike under the old contract for the first few months of this year, but as of the new contract date, we no longer are paying for that cost. Next slide, Lindsay. So, I wanted to just highlight again what we're doing to fix the budget. Number one, we really are focused on properly funding key positions. The lack of staffing, the history of this department where for years, when a vacancy occurred, when someone left, it was just not filled and it was removed from the budget and not returned. And that happened multiple years under the prior administration. And that has crippled our ability to really be proactive in a way that we want to be and desire to be. And what we're doing in 2026 is that we're focusing on filling key vacancies. We are not in a position to fill every position that we hope and dream for. We are not in that budget situation. We understand that, and our budget reflects that. But we've been really focusing on a few key hires that help advance the core missions, one of which is here today, starting. And having traffic engineering to advance the implementation from plans and conversations into actual improvements on our streets is critical in our ability to provide Vision Zero, advance the concepts, advance mobility. The second key piece here is really focusing on delivery. It's wonderful that we get grants. I love that we can tell people how much money we have in grants, but that's not really meaningful to me. What's meaningful is when that money is spent and people see improvements on our streets, experience the city around them with improved investments. Not having money in the books or in the bank, but actually having capital projects delivered. So that's, again, we've had challenges with staffing to advance these projects in a timely fashion. And frankly, the grantors who give us money at some point see a backlog of projects, and that makes us no longer as competitive to give grant money to, even if we have good projects in the pipeline. We need to be able to improve our delivery of the grants we have to continue that. So that's a second area where our budget has not fully, given us that ability to deliver. And lastly is the gimmicks, right? We took out the spending on capital, the spending of OpEx expenses and CapEx. And that's really, having a transparency and an honest budget presented to council, presented to the public. And it makes it challenging to compare this year to last year since they were budgeted so differently. But I'm hopeful that the 27 budget process will allow us to compare, to this being an honest representation. The last thing I just wanted to add here, kind of as we talk about staffing, as part of our transportation master plan, there was a look at a few peer cities with different populations in Jersey City and what their staffing was for their transportation element. And admittedly, that means something different for every city. And when we adjust for population to the 300,000 population we have in Jersey City, the per capita equivalent ranged from 84 to 39 staff members in departments of transportations in other cities, including Oakland, Nashville, San Jose, Boston, and Philly. In the Department of Infrastructure overall, including our sustainability, architecture, engineering, traffic engineering, all of our divisions, we currently have 26 full-time. So, we're definitely staffed below the benchmark. And when we look just at kind of the transportation function, and even if we include engineering to be generous, we're still looking at about 15 to 19 dedicated staff positions. So, I think when we look at our external benchmarking, we can make the argument, you can go to the next slide, Lindsay. We can make the argument that we do need to grow. We need to also grow with the right people and the right structure. But we also recognize we can't do that all in a budget crisis. That's not the time for it. So to that extent, there are 18 requested vacancies that the department believes it would like to see long-term that have been removed from this budget. We know we can't afford it. That saves 1.2 million right off the bat by not filling those vacancies and deferring them. In 2026, additionally, and this includes the transition, 6 staff members left. 3 were actually, I take it back, 4 were added today. I made the slides yesterday. And we also currently have 4 postings, again, by focusing our hires. So we are expanding our headcount, but minimally when we compare who's leaving and who's coming. And again, for context, we currently have 26 full-time staff members to do all of the work that we described. Additionally, I will say this is not living in our cost center, but we've saved over $5 million by rethinking how we approach some of the services and contracts. Some of it was, required based upon contractually, but when VIA is an important service, it's $8 million, approximately a little bit under $8 million annual cost under a prior contract, prior years. That was never funded. That was never appropriated, and it was improperly paid out of capital. We were able to reduce the cost of the VIA service by half for a savings of over $4 million. And this did have real impacts. And we're not going to, say otherwise. This removed weekend service. This removed some service hours. This removed, required people who would take a VIA to use a public transit trip if that's available, even if it's slightly less convenient. But these are the tough decisions and tough trade-offs that we have to make. And we have to think about when we're in a budget crisis. And when we look at our overall budget, when we look at our overall priorities, that $4 million of savings from the VIA contract is significant. Additionally, we converted 2 key contracts. One was EV charging and one was our bike share, both of which had expenses from the city to pay for those into costs that are at no cost to the city. Those are also providing annualized savings. And we also reduced our professional services budget by $500,000. I mentioned that we have high expectations of ourselves, and we are constrained in delivering everything that we really want to by staffing and capacity. And we leverage professional services to provide some of that, especially in areas that we don't have technical expertise on staff. But we've scaled that back. Yet despite all of this, and we cut overtime for sure. We've also paused certain operations in order to focus our efforts on core prioritized services. We've kind of paused providing site plan review to the planning department for applications that move forward and writing memos. We've paused a number of requests that have come from your offices and from constituents about traffic engineering requests for reviews, for improvements in safety, things that we are committed to, we want to see, but we're tracking, but we're not able to deliver without that staffing. We focused on our essential responsiveness. And again, just for example, right now, we have a single staff member in sustainability paid for on the budget. You'll see in our org chart, it's reflected in the budget as well. We have a second staff member that's grant funded. We have two staff members, well, now three with Peter, three staff members in our transportation groups, not including our permitting group. We don't have any licensed architects. And well, now with Pete, well, I'm the only licensed engineer in New Jersey. Peter is a licensed engineer and we'll get his reciprocity for New Jersey. But right now I'm the only licensed engineer in the department. So, despite, some of these criticalities, we've really been focusing on deliver what we think is the most important. Next slide, Lindsay. So looking ahead, we're looking at a few key things. One is really finding new revenue streams. A lot of the key here, and these are some ideas that we've been discussing with the administration and with some other peer agencies. We understand that it's critical to create revenue streams that are offsetting costs to the city for administering programs. These include things like the delivery robots, which we provide a very high level of regulation oversight of, but we are looking to kind of build a program out, but that has cost. So we're looking at revenue streams to offset that. We're looking at TNCs, which is a technical industry jargon word for transportation network company, more commonly known as like an Uber or a Lyft. And looking if there's fees for that or for package delivery fees for people who are using our public right of ways, but aren't necessarily paying the city directly for that use. Similarly, development, they work with the planning department, but looking at are there ways that we could recoup some of our activities that support development through the development fee process. We're also looking to rethink how we issue traffic permits and sharing the city's public right of way, whether it's a sidewalk or whether it's a parking spot or a parking lane, or even closing a street for construction. How are we ensuring that the city is financially compensated for its public assets appropriately, letting someone use through a permit in order to advance a project or something along those lines. We're also very aggressively continuing, we've been successful in the past and we are continuing to be aggressive to pursue external funding. Some of these programs are often limited to capital investments for the projects we want to deliver, but some of these have been able to offset some operating costs. We currently have over $71 million worth of grants, and we're actively working to apply for and pursue every year additional funding for the benefit of our residents. And lastly, we're looking at new ways of delivering. Our EV chargers and a city's bike are one way of being innovative and rethinking how we do things at a way to be more fiscally responsible in the context of our budget crisis, while still being able to deliver the services by restructuring some of these contracts. We're also very aggressively, currently there's an RFP for a camera-assisted parking enforcement program. We've spoken to all the members of the council. We've spoken publicly at a caucus about our vision for that program. At this point in time, there's currently an open RFP process to procure a vendor partner to advance that. And that will open up what we believe will be additional revenue stream. But more importantly, it will be done within a program that is focused on safety. So, you know, it's a net revenue positive, so we're thinking about it as part of the budget, but we really are focused on a safety-related program to bring chaos kind of in these streets and to enforce some of the curbside. And we're focusing on delivering quick build. Those are really low-cost, high-value projects that we can deliver today. So with that, I know I've kind of dug in detail, and I do apologize. I'm an engineer by training, so I often go more into the weeds than perhaps a regular person would. But I welcome any questions and conversation, and appreciate the council's interest and time.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Kaplan. We are going to go by office in your spreadsheet.
Great.
Well, I guess first we'll open it up to general questions, and we'll start by going left to right, and then we'll go the opposite direction for each round. Yeah.
Council Chair, before we do that, I just want to mark Councilperson Gilmore present at
At
1:19
1:03.
PM. So we have 6 council members present, and it's the accurate time that he arrived.
Okay. So,
Watching you.
so general questions or questions on the presentation?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Director Kaplan, for the presentation. I have a first question about EV charging station. And just want to tell you that how grateful we feel that your department is, we all know the challenges your department is facing, understaffed for sure. But these questions I'm asking so that I'm sure you're aware, but just want to know what is the plan for EV charging. And I'll give you one example. The 2 EV charging station right at the City Hall parking has not been working for last 2 months. And I don't know if we want to change the vendor or what's the plan?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. And Director Diamond, tell me if you want to add anything afterwards. But at a high level, we're in a transition with there's 2 EV charging programs. Let's just kind of start for charging stations. We have one for city fleets, and we have one for the public to use. I believe your question is related to the one that the public is using. That includes a number of charging stations that have been inoperable for an extended period of time. And we have had challenges with the prior vendor in terms of their responsiveness in allowing us to provide updates and repairs. And under the prior contract, those repairs were to be done at the cost to the city. We would have to pay for those repairs, which is not unreasonable under that contract terms. But since then, the council has passed a new contract with a new vendor that would be providing new stations, and I believe there's certain maintenance responsibilities as well under that contract for the new vendor. And, you know, given the budget crisis, given the non-responsiveness and challenges with a prior vendor, and given a new contract with a new vendor, or at least that's been approved by council, we've been really focused on the future. And rather than repair what's there today that we've had extensive history and challenges with, as has the public, based on their frustrations that I'm sure you're referring to, we are hoping to just have those replaced in kind with a new vendor system that will be maintained, will not cost the city anything. And that is our goal. That is our vision. We've hit some bureaucratic challenges just in getting contracts negotiated, getting everything locked in and in sight. So that has been a further delay than what we envisioned originally since the council approved that contract. But things have been moving forward, and we do intend and are fully committed to having those on-street charging stations fully operational with the new system.
Now, my next question is about camera-assisted parking enforcement pilot. When are you anticipating to start this? Because now, obviously, with new RFP,
So
yeah,
before
what's the timeline?
Yeah, so there are some things I am able to answer, and for this one, I'm a little bit constricted because we have an active RFP on the streets right now. That RFP is due on Friday. That is when vendors would be expected to respond. Our goal is to have items on the August council agenda before you. I think that's a timeline that I can speak about today publicly. Once those RFPs are received, we'll be able to certainly have more detailed conversations. And I can talk to you a little bit more offline in terms of what we're thinking. But because of the public procurement process, we can't really speak about things not written into the RFP.
And you mentioned about delivery robot regulations. Can you please talk more about it?
Yeah, so, a couple things. First of all, I want to give a thank you to Councilman Efros, Chief of Staff, Jifu, who's been a collaborator, pulling a lot of significant thought into this. And I can also say I had a kind of informal conversation with the author of, was it Sidewalk? What's the name of that book, Peter? Sidewalk Wars? I'm drawing a blank on the name, but it's a hot book in the profession right now, about really looking at the sidewalk right of way, the maintenance, and delivery robots being a key part of that nationally, and regulatory schemes across the country that are kind of lacking, and what cities can do, what states can do. And this is a concern that I think we have in Jersey City. We are blessed and cursed by being at the forefront of many of these technologies deploying here early, one of the first spots in New Jersey. So we get benefits, but we also get problems, right? And so I do think this is an active area that we are looking to. There's not really like another city in New Jersey that has a mature regulatory structure around these robots. We can't copy and paste someone else's homework, right? We have to invent this ourselves. So we're looking at best practices, and it's a bit challenging. But we do believe that there are both benefits, but also legitimate concerns with the way these robots sometimes are operated, and believe that a regulatory scheme that provides guardrails, and additionally provides revenue to offset some of the administration of a regulatory framework that establishes those guardrails will both benefit the public and allow us to do those regulations. So exactly what those are, exactly what those look like, are something that we are still thinking about. And frankly, we are challenged with staffing and time and bandwidth to be as proactive as we would and aggressive as we'd like to be in really fleshing this out.
And are we asking director's office salary?
Well, Mom, so your questions, you asked all your questions right now.
Just one. Oh, look at you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just to correct what I just said, the book of the summer is Sidewalk Nation. So put it on your reading list. It's the name of the book.
Each reading.
I want to mention one thing, Director, that we know that how much money we are losing without parking enforcement. There are parking meters, but there are no stickers, so people can't pay through app, right? My office has been struggling reaching out to your department, and you are very helpful. Your staff is very helpful, but sometimes we just go in a circle. Your staff asks us to reach. Your office asks us to reach out to DPW. We go to DPW. They ask us to reach out to you. But the question is, why are we not prioritizing this? Because like just yesterday, I was at the Juror Square, and I wanted to pay for parking through the app. There was no parking stickers. And then I was literally, for 5 minutes, because I wanted to see how can I pay. For 5 minutes, I was checking, I could not find any sticker. So I decided not to pay because I did not have coin. Now think about how much money can be earned, but we are just not prioritizing. And again, I understand that you are understaffed, but then I feel if we do not enforce this, we cannot generate any revenue. And something where I was in Hoboken, I paid $12 for 3 hours or maybe 3.5 hours, $12. And here I just, city actually lost that $12 that I would have paid for 3.5 hours. And I think we have to prioritize this. We have been very frustrated for last 2 months because our office has been prioritizing this. This is one of the revenue generating idea where every second person in Jersey City is asking us. And now we are studying what are the other cities charging. Why Jersey City is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to share one more example. I was on Central Avenue. I paid 50 cents for 1.5 hours. That's, I mean, we can charge way more, right? If I go to Morristown, I'm paying way more. So why am I not paying enough or reasonable amount to Jersey City? Um,
So let me jump in here. Parking enforcement and all the challenges that you articulated is a priority for this administration. It is a multi-department, multi-division effort. As you've been hearing from the various departments, they all have a piece, but there is no, main department that is in charge of that. So me, as business administrator, I oversee the Department of Infrastructure. I oversee the Department of Public Works. I oversee the Department of Public Safety. I work very closely with the Law Department and the Finance Department. This is an initiative that I will be prioritizing with our BA's office staff to project manage, the creation of this multi-work stream initiative and try to really tackle those challenges that you're talking about. And I'd be very excited to work with your office and any of the other council members' office to map out what it will take for us to improve parking in Jersey City.
Can that,
that I have 7 interns, and all of them, the task is how do we generate revenue through parking enforcement?
I would love to work with your interns.
I really want for us to take it forward because, believe it or not, this has been quite challenging. I totally understand all the challenges you are having, but I feel there is money right there and we are not taking it. So thank you for being patient, but I'm frustrated for last couple of months, so maybe it's coming out. But thank you for your work.
I think in the meantime, you can make a $12 checkout to Andy Kaplan.
So certainly not to me, it's to the city of Jersey City.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay. Thank you so much. I want to follow up on Councilwoman Singh's questions. I noticed, and this is a question on your presentation, because I noticed in your presentation that you have raised parking permit fees, the maximum allowed by statutorily. That is a statute of Jersey City, correct?
So yes, except these are not parking permit fees. These are traffic permit fees. And let me explain what that represents because it is confusing. The parking permit fees, like Business Administrator Choi mentioned, this parking is kind of spread across a couple divisions. Parking permit fees are set by public safety. That's what residents pay or for a visitor pass or for an annual pass. We certainly have dialogue with them and we certainly work on some curbside management and policy related thereto. What I have in this presentation that we call permit fees are not for parking permits. Those are what we call, again, we should probably rename these roadway opening fees and roadway closure fees. Roadway closure fees or traffic permits are when someone needs to close a road. Whether that's a utility, whether that's the MUA, whether that's a contractor or someone filming, when they want a permit to close the road to traffic, they apply for that. We review it, we approve it, we ensure that they don't close, different parties don't close all the parallel routes at the same time. When they want to dig up the road, we call that opening the road. When they physically dig underneath the road in the public right of way, whether they're creating a new telecom or fiber optic line or water line or sewer line or PSCNG gas line, we need to permit that. And part of that review includes coordination to ensure that they know what else is under that road and that there's coordination that they're not accidentally digging up someone else's utility. That also requires them to restore it with a trench, right, to restore the pavement. And we have records of that so that if a pavement trench starts to fail, we can return within a certain period of time and hold them accountable for restoration of that collapsing trench. All of those reviews, documentation, and restoring, those are our permits fees. So a couple other things we do is we do also charge for dumpster permits. So if you want to place a dumpster in the public right of way, that's an additional permit that we review. And then I guess ADA parking, if you're requesting an ADA parking, I think that's all of them, more or less. So that's Oh, the disabled, okay, there's not a charge for the disabled parking.
Okay, thank you for clarifying what you
Yeah.
meant by permit fees
First come,
in the
first served.
presentation. I just wanted to echo Councilwoman Singh's point. I think for metered parking and for non-resident parking permits, as well as for resident parking permits, particularly those for households with multiple vehicles, I think our rates could be much higher. I know my office has stated our intent on working on a parking reform ordinance, and I look forward to working with you and the various departments and the other council offices, and as well as the administration on that, because it does seem like this is an area where we could make some more revenue, and we are arguably undercharging right now relative to other nearby municipalities. So thank you for explaining the difference between the permit fees referenced in the presentation and parking permit fees are separate from traffic permit fees. Thank you. My other question for the presentation was on your quick build program. You mentioned the targeted rate for this year will be over 100 safety improvements at over 80 locations in neighborhoods across the city. Can I ask, what was the rate of quick builds last year?
We'll look that up for you. And I will let you know what that number represents and why that number is the number we're building. At a high level, it's based on contract capacity. So how we implement these quick builds is through our certain contracts that we have to physically install pavement markings, crosswalks, delineators, update signal timings. And in order to do that, it requires two things. It requires budget and it requires contract capacity. So we've scoped our program to use the maximum amount of the contract capacity that we have on the books this year. And this administration provided the full amount of funding to utilize those contracts to their full extent. And that's how we define the scope of the quick build program. And then we prioritize the locations based on a number of factors that were outlined in the, what's it called? The traffic calming toolkit. Thank you, Director. The traffic calming toolkit that included proximity to schools, that included, or parks, that included our high crash injury network. So that's how the locations were chosen within the constraints of those contracts. In terms of how this compares to past years, did I stall enough for you, Lindsay? Or are you still looking it up?
Okay, I apologize, still looking it up. I believe one of the things we were doing was sort of backing into what our contract capacity is. I believe it's fairly similar. It varies a little bit based on the types of projects. So there are some years in the past where, say, we've done a protected bike lane on a whole corridor, and then every intersection gets curb extensions. We often will add a new crossing. We'll often do some signal changes. So there are some years where if there was a corridor project, it might have been a little bit higher. But I believe it's roughly in line with prior years. And then we will be looking to accelerate as we now have, as we're building up the traffic engineering staff and engineering, we're looking to accelerate that number, but we can follow up with sort of historic numbers.
Okay, that would be great. Thank
We'll
you.
follow up with that if we, I don't want to give wrong numbers to you or the record. So if we don't have it handy, we'll follow up with you on that.
All right, thank you so much. This is a general question. Are our salary postings competitive enough broadly to attract high quality and proven talent to Jersey City?
Very broad question, and I'll give you a very broad answer. With someone we just hired in the room, we certainly, I believe, this administration has increased those postings. There's a couple constraints to this. One is the market, right? And I'll tell you, just speaking from my own experience as an engineer, the federal government passed the IIJ, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. They pumped a lot of money into infrastructure, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. A lot of engineering firms started hiring blitzes, and they got private capital investments because there's a lot of projects that they saw coming down the pipeline and deliver. The cost of an engineer specifically has gone up significantly in the last few years since that a lot of money has been invested into needing engineers. We are working to increase the salaries, to attract talent, but we still struggle with that. And sometimes, we also need to be cognizant of, other professionals and other areas, both within this department and other departments that may not have, the height of their market, right? And we need to find ways where we can increase the salary range commensurate to market rates to attract talent, but also, find other ways to deliver if it may not be the most cost efficient to hire someone at a very high price if we can't compete. So this administration, our budget reflects an increase to a number of key technical positions salary postings, including, from prior years where these are posting vacants, the engineer director, traffic engineering director, supervising engineer, and architect, and I believe senior landscape architect. Those positions kind of have had their salaries increased a little bit more commensurate to market rate.
Thank
But-
you.
Some of them are still vacant.
Thank you. We learned in the HEDC hearings that your department is planning to do another city parking study. My question is, why is this necessary when one was conducted in 2020? And I know there may be some updates, but hopefully not a whole new study is needed. And how much does this study cost the department?
So I also learned that from
Oh.
HEDC meeting. I think there may have been some miscommunication here. I think we, as the Department of Infrastructure, as a set of professionals, of planners who have a certain oversight of the curb space, and have completed through an NJTPA grant a number of years back, a parking study, have a certain technical expertise to help guide and advise that conversation. But as the business administrator mentioned, we don't have ownership of parking in the city. So I don't believe we're looking at another study. But what we do need to go from the study that was published through the Department of Infrastructure in the past to actual changes in policy and on our streets. I don't want to call it a study because it kind of is confusing, but there does need to be an effort to translate a theoretical policy into something actionable and implementing. I don't know, I'll defer to the BA onto what group does that, but we'll support it.
Yeah, I need to go back and take a look at the notes. I know we talked about parking lots and parking lots in buildings as something we were auditing and taking a look at, but I don't remember the parking study. But I'll take a note of it and circle back with you.
Thank you. My last general question, and I have other questions for the specific departments, but my last general question is, where are we on moving towards the 20 miles an hour citywide speed limit? I know that was a key priority.
Yes, so we've completed a study that we believe justifies the speed limit reduction from a technical standpoint. What we're now advancing is an understanding of what are the practical changes needed to implement that. Everywhere we have a sign that says 25 miles per hour would need to be changed to 20. Every time we have a pavement marking that says slow 25 miles per hour would need to be changed. So we are currently, as part of the Vision Zero SS4A grant, looking, I think in the next few weeks, we're going to start doing a data collection through LiDAR of our high injury networks and across the city to try to understand where those assets that need to be changed are, so that we could actually create kind of an implementation plan and understand what the cost would be to implement that policy.
Okay, great. So it is moving forward, and you're just developing a plan for how to change the signage.
Just a little bit more about that implementation study is also looking at best practices from other communities who have undertaken that kind of a change, the communication practices, what kind of noticing, and also for us to understand some of the design changes on some of the streets that are designed to almost invite you to go above the speed limit. Many of Jersey City's streets, people are already going 25 or less. Often they're actually going below 20 miles per hour, which is a benefit to our urban grid and the number of intersections. But one thing we do know is that we have some streets, Grand Street, Communipaw, some of these larger streets that go through the city. We'd like to also pair some design changes that will encourage folks to actually go that reduced 20-mile-per-hour speed limit as well.
I think that makes sense, but I would hate to delay this while we're waiting for the design changes. I'd rather see us move forward with the speed limit reduction and then move forward with the design changes as we should. But I don't want that to be a holdup.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think it's going to hold up. It's just part of the analysis of what the implementation is going to look like. But a lot of that right now is around how do we roll it out? How do we budget for rolling it out? And what Director Kaplan had mentioned.
Okay. Thank you so much. Councilman Efros?
Thanks. I have a few general questions before we get to the divisions. First, I'll just ask BA, we can maybe talk about this more offline, and I can also ask this question to finance, but I think it would be helpful to get a set of guidelines on proper versus improper use of capital funds for each different department, because it sounds like for infrastructure, there are very clear uses of where capital funds make sense and are acceptable and where they're not. But that seems to be different for each department.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide that. We had sent something along in one of the other council meetings when we were talking about the use of the capital funds, but I'm happy to resend it.
Thank you. Apologies if I missed that. So just general questions. I really appreciate the presentation here. Appreciate the work that you all do. Probably the team that I email with the most on a weekly basis. And just work together a lot, especially recently on the delivery robot regulation. I know CFO is out on medical leave right now, but partnership there has been really, really helpful. Hopefully we can get something together soon. You boast an incredible amount of grant money that you all are managing. So kudos that we're getting money not from taxpayers that are coming into the city. How are we ensuring that through your staff's work, we're not losing $1 of that grant money that we've been awarded? And what do you think is necessary that you need to be provided with to make sure that we make good on all this grant money that we've been awarded, particularly Franklin Street up in the Heights, but also Summit at the Heights, Journal Square, and then Communipaw. There's different sites that we've been awarded money for. So if you can just speak to that grant management and any other needs that you all have as a department to make sure it's successful.
I appreciate that question. And I can say that when I personally kind of joined the department, it was after there was a few key departures. And there was also the engineering director, which was a departure maybe a year or more prior to that. And since that time, Deputy Director Banghart, under his leadership and with a lot of his personal sweat and time, has been a bit reactive in responding to whenever a grantor says, where's this? I need this to move. Where's this? Drew's been bringing in other members of our staff to keep things moving. And at this point in time, our grantors are getting a little frustrated with some of the grants that we have, and we're working closely with them as a focus, especially in the last few weeks as the federal authorization kind of deadlines come and some of the departments of the state want to get projects to authorization. And, there's a number of challenges here. There's a number of just administrative challenges and, our limited staffing and our variety of focuses has certainly impeded our ability to more proactively and more expeditiously advance all of these programs simultaneously. So I do think that, us being able to fill some of the key vacancies and hires, I don't know if Peter knows this yet, but he's going to have a number of these projects that he's going to be responsible for. We hope to fill some of the vacancies in the engineering department to advance that. I think that we believe that will provide a certain kind of more stable minimum level of staffing capacity to ensure that these grant programs are continuing to advance. Additionally, the prior administration, which has awarded some of these grants, or every grant's different. A number of these grants will pay for construction, but the city would have to, for example, pay for design or pay for construction inspection, which are, again, relatively small dollars in the, tens of percents ballpark of the total project cost. But in past years, we have a number of grants that have been sitting because no capital funding was allocated for the design, even though we received a grant for the construction. And if it wasn't in that capital program, maybe it'd be in the next one. And so in this capital reallocation, we work closely with the administration to prioritize a number of projects that have been sitting idle for a period of time, including Monticello, including Caven Point and Pacific, where we received reallocation of capital, and we've actually put out a professional services request for proposals. We've received a number of them back. After this budget hearing, I will make sure to review them along with our staff so that we can bring a designer on board. And when the capital reallocation completes, if it does, then we would be able to enter into a contract and, actually start to move some things forward. So those are kind of some key components. And I think as we move forward and look to the capital programming, there's a number of requests that we have for grant related matches or design work that are also important, but we have the real backing and commitment of the administration that recognizes the importance of this. So that's, I hope that answers your question, Councilman.
Yes, thank you. So a couple other general questions. Your headline results in your presentation is 520,000 plus trips provided by infrastructure mobility services in the first half of this year through things like VIA, Port Liberté Ferry, and from City Bike. Administration is cutting VIA in about half. The city, if I understand correctly, City Bike reimbursement for city staff is being ended for maybe not reimbursement, but the City Bike plan for city staff, I think, is being ended. So just with a couple of those things, I would hate to see the headline results be a place where we're actually now like detracting from for the rest of the year. I understand the constraints, but if you could just speak to where does VIA live in this budget, or where has it been allocated now that we've actually corrected a lot of what was wrong with our VIA contract before? And I'll leave it at that for now. For that question.
Yeah, so a couple responses to that. First of all, the VIA program is one that we value.
Yeah.
We value the partnership, we value the service it provides. And there are parts of this city that VIA and microtransit provide services to that don't have the density that a fixed route service could provide. So if we've done extensive numbers. We looked at the cost, per vehicle trip of like or per trip of a bus full of people is way less than a VIA. And that's true. But that only works if you have a route that can fill a bus full of people. And VIA is serving areas of the city that are underserved by transit because you don't have that market demand for a fixed route traditional service. So it actually is a lower cost per person than a fixed route in that type of environment. So we value that service, but we also recognize that, we are in a budget crisis. We need to save money. And, the VIA program was a very significant cost that was previously paid out of capital. It was not properly appropriated in past years, past administrations. It is not a capital expense to operate that service. And for that reason, we've been focusing the VIA trips on areas of core service hours. And we've pushed when a public transit trip is available, riders would be redirected within the VIA app from getting a VIA trip assigned to them to be told, here's where you go to take the bus and here's how you do it, or light rail or other transit trip, so that we could preserve the capacity of the VIA system and the trips that we are providing to the trips that are not able to be accommodated by the existing public transport network. So we may see this number reduce, but I don't believe it will be reduced proportional to the cost savings because we're focusing the design of the revised system to focus on the trips that can't be served alternatively during the core service hours. We also recognize that there are people who valued the service hours that we cut, and it is impactful. And it is our department's desire to try to seek external funding that can expand some of the operation and service hours because we value the service. But when it comes to just what we can afford in a budget crisis, we've been really trying to focus the VIA program on that. Oh, I'm sorry, and City Bike. Thank you, Lindsay. So City Bike, it's not about, the savings on City Bike is nothing to do with staff time. To clarify that one, we enter into a contract with City Bike. Previously, we would pay them approximately $300,000 or something like that a year, but there'd be a revenue split where some of the fare, I'll call it fare box, it's not the right term, but the payments that customers use to pay for the City Bike would be shared with the city. That netted out as a cost to the city. Last year, that cost was $142,000. So it was reduced from the amount, the fee by revenue share, but it was not reduced to zero or positive. So we renegotiated that contract as part of an RFP and a renewal, and now we will not pay money to City Bike. We will still receive revenue share. It's a smaller amount and it kicks in at a higher threshold, but the downside risk, the cost to the city has been eliminated from a financial standpoint. And that's part of just the way we approach and renegotiate that contract. And that has not resulted in any changes to service hours or support.
Thank you. I'll just ask a final general question. We'll keep it moving here since I know there's so much and we haven't even begun line items yet. But just contractors patching up the road after they do work, and you mentioned road openings. Is that the responsibility of engineering, traffic engineering, DPW, a mix across these different departments? And how are we ensuring that we do that patchwork ourselves in the events that contractors fail to? And even before, how do we make sure that contractors actually do it themselves?
Yeah, so great question. And one advantage, one advantage of having a small department is that we can walk over and talk to each other pretty easily. So right now, the permits are issued by the traffic engineering group under Doug, who's here. But then the pavement is kind of analyzed and managed by our engineering division, by an individual and one of our younger engineers. So the DPW is responsible for filling potholes. So we work closely in partnership together. So when the DPW is out there receiving C-click fixes for filling a pothole and it's a collapsed trench, they'll let us know. Our engineering group will go back to the permit database of permits that were issued by traffic engineering, determine what contractor was that permit, the old permit was issued to, communicate to them that they need to repair the trench under the terms of that permit. And in terms of what we have not yet had real problems with the contractor failing to do that. They may tell us, oh, that wasn't our trench, that was someone else's trench, right? So there's some tracking it down. But generally, there's a group of contractors that perform this work that receive future permits and understand and are responsible actors that when there is a collapsed trench, they will restore it. We can, withhold future permits if there's a pattern longitudinally. Well, I should talk to law before I commit to that, but I don't think we've encountered that, luckily. So we haven't had to explore it. Generally, we've had responsiveness from.
Right. Yeah, I think everything we can do to make sure it's nipped in the bud at the very moment of the contractor doing their work is wonderful, but appreciate that you all are collaborating across divisions and departments.
Oh,
Yeah.
you want to?
Yeah. And additionally, as part of, what Doug does with the road opening permits, when they do excavate, they do need to post a bond. So if for some reason they don't come back and fulfill their, restoration, we can, work with the bonding company, make those repairs ourselves, and then, no contractor wants that against basically their insurance policy. So it's
Right.
Their insurance policy gets dinged and, their rates for their next job are going to go up. So that's another way to make sure they're responsive.
Thank you. I want to keep it moving. So Councilman Gilmore, general questions on the presentation, the division?
Yes, that was my question, Jake. So, I'm glad to hear that response, but the reality for me, we've been going through an issue on Stegman Street where a contractor ripped the road up and it's still doing the Harlem Shake to this day. So I guess along the lines of Councilperson Efros, if we can just talk about what is the clear protocol when whoever go in the streets, like what's the duration, what's the time that's allowed to last before that road is repaved?
That is a decisively complicated question. Or not decisively, deceptively complicated question. Councilman, it depends on a lot of things. So oftentimes roadway repaving is not required following a trench repair, as long as the trench is in good condition. Depending on the exact work, we may require the roadway to be repaved. The MUA typically has a policy that after they do work, they will patch the trench. There's then something called a settlement period. So the soil that you put to fill that trench, it has to settle. So if you repave it right away, it actually won't long-term stay that way. So you're left with not an ideal situation during that settlement period. And then, for example, the MUA, they'll come back and repave if it's a more significant repair. So sometimes you will be seeing a trench on a roadway that is in a settlement period and there's a plan to come back, and it may take a year or so for that settlement to take place.
Oh, so wait, so who's ultimately responsible for the repair? I'm a little confused. So I understand the process of the ground having to level out in order for them to repave it. So who's once like, let's say if Bob and Joe's excavation go and they working on some type of repair, and then when they leave, they patch it up. We all know that the patch is not, it's not sustainable because the patch leave it unbalanced, right? So there's a point which you're saying that patch has to level out before they repave it. Who's responsible for are they just responsible for just patching it or putting it back to its original form?
It depends on, my understanding, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, or it depends.
It would depend on the size of the.
Nope.
A second, Doug.
Need the mic.
It would depend on the size and the nature of the excavation. Generally speaking, for single-family, two-family home repairs, they're not making a large enough excavation where we're going to make them repair. What we will make them do is what's called infrared asphalt repair, which means when they put the top surface course on the trench, they're supposed to use it's basically a giant infrared light that melts the asphalt together, so there's no seam. We have to require them to do that. We say it on the permit. There are instances where we should inspect and require them to do it, but they are required to do it. It's their requirement. For larger utility projects, that require like trenching, like block-long trenching, that's almost always MUA. The director covered the MUA's responsibility. PSE&G has the same responsibility. Sometimes we get fiber optic companies. They have to pave curb to curb on the block they affected up to the point at the end of the trench.
Oh, okay. So larger projects is repavement. Smaller projects is not necessarily pavement, but there is something that they have to do to shore it up.
Correct. There's some level of discretion, and there's a balance. We don't want every resident who has their sewer line repaired to have to repave the street because, the expense is high. It's fair for utility company to bear that expense. And in addition, when there's new construction, depending on the size of the building, usually the planning board will require them to do curb to curb repavement to the property line, which will account for the trenches made during the utility connections.
Now, who from infrastructure checks to see if that's been done?
So who holds them accountable?
Yes.
If it's a site plan, that accountability is held as part of the CO process of construction code inspection of that property. If it's for one of these traffic permits and trenches, we have inspectors within our engineering department who may observe. Honestly, we don't necessarily look at every single cut in the road as much as we'd like to, but if they observe following one of these permanent cuts that it's not to our standard, then we will, follow up in the ways that Drew mentioned. Additionally, sometimes it may look good on day one, but then a few months later, there's a deficiency underneath that trench. And we will receive C-click fixes. We will receive emails from council members' offices, and that will trigger us to then look back through the permitting system. Our engineering division specifically will then issue a letter and hold accountable the permittee, the person who received that permit, once we were made aware of a failed trench. So, Doug's group will determine what mitigation post is required. And then if a contractor is not fulfilling that obligation, our engineering division will hold them accountable.
Okay, now another, my last general question is, whenever developers are going through the journey of bringing a building to fruition, there's this thing called a traffic study. If you can walk us by, like, what does the traffic study entails? Because for me and for regular residents, particularly as it relates to Monticello Avenue, there's nowhere to park now, right? So they say, well, the traffic study doesn't call for X amount of parking in this establishment. So I'm just trying to see, like, how does that process play out? What exactly are they looking at?
Councilman, you've hit upon a passionate topic of mine, and I will try my best to keep myself brief here. And actually, it's funny, but before I started in this role at a conference, me and Peter actually led a conversation circle about this. This is an industry-wide challenge. Traffic impact statements that are applied with development are, by engineering standards, right? What the accepted state of the practice are, really focused on vehicular trips based upon the use of that development. And then they take those trips, they take the number of trips, number of people going to this new facility, assign them a mode, how many people are driving, how many people are biking, how many people are walking. And then of the people driving, what is the level of service impact, which is a fancy way to say how much traffic is there from those trips. They don't really look at, and again, this is an industry standard. This is a challenge and something I disagree with that industry standard. And I'd love, with unlimited brain and time, I'd love to help solve it. But they don't really look at pedestrian trips or level of service of the sidewalk or level of service of the bike lane or safety of all these pedestrians. And they don't always look at parking, of on-street parking impacts. That's not really the purview. The purview of these traffic impact statements, as per industry standard, is really focused on vehicular congestion and delay from additional car trips from development. I believe that this is something that we can have conversations about and be more proactive about. But the parking, in terms of like what parking and people coming and driving, do they fit on the street and whatnot, that's a much more complicated conversation. And that really, as it ties into development, falls into kind of the planning purview, in the sense that there are parking standards that are set by zoning and planning for each development and what they do or don't need to provide. And that's both vehicular parking and bicycle parking, which Jersey City is very progressive with in terms of requiring those considerations as well. When we look at what I would say, I think you're concerned in an area like Monticello, we would want to look at curbside management. So we have a lot of demands, but we have more people looking to use that curb space than we have available curb space. So how do we manage it better? Because we're not making more curb space. These strategies for that include potentially parking meters, includes time limited parking areas. It also could include loading zones. And we have a pilot study. I don't know that we've exactly determined where, but we have funding as part of the safety SS4A grant to look at curbside management. To, it's not useful. I know we've had a conversation and a walk through with Jackson Hill Main Street SID on MLK around the light rail station and south. And there are no time limits, right? Those people move their cars for street sweeping, and residents will park on the business district the same way almost for a week. So curbside management is something that is, I think, would be better to address some of those concerns.
Can I ask a follow-up question on this? What is a study to see?
Okay.
What is a study to see how many parking spots on that street are required or are used regularly? Is there any way to figure out, especially I'm talking about Columbus Drive or Central Avenue, where we want shoppers to come because we want these small businesses to do well. But we also want to make sure that, there's no traffic, but then cars are parked for limited time, and when I want to go for shopping, I should not be struggling to find parking and then I change my mind and go somewhere where I can find parking. So what's the study about those parking spots based on the uses?
So a curb space management study at a high level would look at demand and supply and find ways to try to put them into balance. That's a very high level. And, you know, I mean, this may be a better conversation for, you know, I'll defer to the chair of this committee, but I'm happy to kind of talk about like a technical, what goes into a curbside management study. You know, and I think as it relates to budget, this is something that the BA is leading an initiative about parking overall, and that this is something we can bring to that conversation and that table, and happy to talk about the technical specifics of.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to defer to Councilman Brooks, Council President, that's all right, because he has to leave at 3, and then we'll get to you. Councilman Brooks.
Thank you. I have to leave before 3, like in mere moments because I have a doctor's appointment at 3 p.m. So thank you.
That's what I mean.
Now everybody in Jersey City knows I have a doctor's appointment.
We wish you the best.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Following up on in the slide presentation, the transportation master plan. When is that anticipated to be completed, and will it have a revision of the 2020 citywide parking plan, or is that going to be separate?
So the transportation master plan, I believe that the draft final documents are posted on the website. And the next step is for those, we're going to call them draft final. They're kind of final from our standpoint, but they would be presented to the planning board for consideration and adoption. I can certainly follow up offline and give you the direction to those documents. I will say, as part of the master plan, we've identified, I believe it's 7 key priority areas. And one of the identified areas is to investigate parking reform and management, identified as a concern. It does not go into the specifics of what the solutions are. There's a previous study that predates this that looks at some parking recommendations on parking policy reform. And I think that was alluded to earlier in this conversation. And so that's, I think, the totality of kind of how the master plan identifies and acknowledges the priority of this review.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just take the opportunity to say that, you know, I've had a lot of feedback from residents in our ward about resident-only parking, citywide. Bayonne does it, Union City does it. You know, and Council President has raised this as well. Probably not something that's feasible to accomplish this year, but maybe to start looking at it for next year or 2028. Second question. We had been in correspondence about there's no contractor for speed humps currently.
That is correct.
Okay. And would that, business administrator, my favorite topic, would that be, since those are kind of permanent, they're not temporary objects, would that be potentially part of the capital budget?
Yeah, sure. Yes. But there's 2 components to getting things installed, right? There's money, and then there's having someone who can do it either on staff or contracted. So right now that I believe that would be a capital expense because that would be part of kind of asphalt pavement. But we currently are looking into what our pavement contract program looks like overall, and including that line item. Here, let me give it to Drew.
Warrant, well, just like a warrant analysis too, which now we have Peter to help us out and identify if a speed hump is something that should be put on that particular road or if it could become more of a harm to users.
Thank you.
I'll just also say, I'm going to circulate for the council the rules of capital funding. It's complicated, which is why we also have a bond council who reviews all of the purchases that we are using capital funds for. So that might also help you understand what falls in capital budget versus operating expenses.
Okay. And well, I know we have a meeting scheduled tomorrow, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty of stuff in Ward B, but looking forward to the improvements on Communipaw, which we'll go through towards FNA as well. getting the UEZ improvements going on West Side Avenue. And lastly, just wanted to flag for follow-up for Amanda to talk to you about the rain gardens, or the rain basins. Am I using the correct term? Rain gardens? Okay.
Yep.
On West Side Avenue that, you know, we're not, they could use some TLC. So, that's all I have. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Council President, for letting me go first.
Councilman Brooks?
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry for blowing up your spot, Joel.
All right, I am going to piggyback off of something that Councilman Gilmore was discussing, but see if I can bring us back to the numbers because we have less than a half hour to get through this budget. But I understand that we don't really have the opportunity to have the directors in front of us as a group and discuss some things. So I think a lot of things that just were discussed publicly were very important and things that the community wanted to know. But in regard to paving, I know during Philip's first term, he came down really hard on the city contractors like PSCG in regards to paving. And I believe, and this is going to be directed to our city clerk, and I don't expect him to know off the top of his head right now, but I'm going to ask that he look into it. But I believe in 2015, not us, but that council at that time passed an ordinance that contractors are supposed to repave block to block any road that has been resurfaced by the city within 10 years if they rip it up. So if we could kind of look into that, I believe it was sponsored by former Councilwoman Osborne. If we can review that and make sure that the council gets it and also that Director Kaplan has access to that because, you know, sometimes we pass laws and then it's on the books and no one knows about it. But in that, if we take a look at that, Director Kaplan, if there's any room where you think we could make changes or make that stronger, or if there is any way to collect revenue from PSC&G, MUA when they do these projects, because I think that's where most of our road disruption comes from, those projects the most. If there's any way for us to save on our paving by making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do or imposing certain fines, then that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. And I could say, I know we're familiar with that. I think it may have been implemented closer to 2020, but we'll defer to the clerk's searching abilities to find it. But we currently do have that requirement where it's applicable, and we'd be happy to review it and discuss with you other ideas for legislative changes to enhance.
Council
Thank you.
President, I will forward the ordinance to all the council members and Director Kaplan and anybody in your staff that wants to be CC'd on it. I'll be more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, clerk.
So I know we haven't even gotten to the line items yet. It's already about 2:30. If we could extend to 3:30, we've extended some other departments' hearings a little bit. Are there time constraints for the clerk or anyone in the infrastructure team? I want to be respectful of folks' time, but we have a lot of questions sent back here.
No problem for me.
That's much appreciated. To 3:30. Okay, hard stop at, okay, our clerk says hard stop at 3:30, so it's a hard stop at 3:30.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess the next division is the Office of the Director. If anyone has any questions on that office, on line items on that office, I have no questions on that office. And I did promise we would go the opposite directions. Council President, did you have any questions on the Office of the Director?
I do not.
Thank you.
While Councilman Gilmore is getting his notes, I will just ask, 10,000 were requested for union allowances, but none was drafted in the proposed budget. Or we're not going to be negligent on any responsibilities through our union contracts, are we?
Nope. To clarify, I'll defer to finance on why. but these are uniform requests, and those are budgeted under the union allowance code. The uniform requests for us include new safety vests, new polo shirts. It's a request that we make. We'd love to have it, but it was not advanced, and I think we can understand why.
Got it. Thanks.
This is just department.
Okay.
Councilwoman Singh, did you have questions on the director?
Just one quick question. So line item 306, dues and subscriptions. What are the dues and subscription we are paying for?
Certainly, this is a budget.
Amount.
Yeah, this is a budget line that is meant to accommodate primarily the license fees. So I'm a professional engineer, Drew's a licensed landscape architect within the director's office. So this would cover fees to keep those current, and that includes continuing education requirements, costs of webinars or whatnot that are required in order to maintain those license certificates.
Thank you, Director.
I don't,
Great. So we will go on to the Division of Architecture, and we'll start at the opposite end. Councilwoman Singh.
I do not have any question. Thank you.
Just a little.
Thank you. So I noticed the architect vacancy has been carried from 2025. Is the department having issues filling this position? And do we open ourselves up to liability by not having a licensed architect on staff?
So, Brian, can you correct me? When did our architect resign? Last March. So it was not for the entirety of 2025, but it was budgeted in 2025 for a full amount. And so correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I don't think we have per se a liability. I think the concern is we're limited in what we're able to advance. Engineering role, which you can talk about in the next division, is something required under state statute. Architect is not. One thing that we did do earlier this year is we reallocated some of our professional service funds to provide some on-call architectural support. So that would be a consultant or professional staff that would be able to answer questions under contract for that, for any emergent issues that we may want to seek an architect's advice and guidance for, because we don't have one on staff.
Thank you. That's my question for architecture.
Thank you. If you could just speak to the professional services, the 50,000 shifted from capital budget. Is this the same as the engineering, traffic engineering, and transportation that all had much more significant amount moved from capital into operating?
So to clarify a little bit, yes. However, it was moved from the engineering division to where it was paid in the past as capital for engineering on-call. $50,000 was moved to the architecture department for an architectural on-call. So it's the same type of contract, it's the same intent, but it would be to reach a professional architect for emergent or questions that come up in the due course. And it was moved here because we had this vacancy, extended vacancy of the architect position.
Thank you. And then on line item 401, last year we adopted $60,000 for furniture and furnishings, and it looks like this amount is significantly reduced within the architecture division budget, but the majority is maybe moved toward a citywide office furniture budget. If you could just explain what this line item of furniture and furnishings is supposed to cover and was covering last year, and what exactly is being shifted to the citywide budget?
Yeah, and let me clarify, this is not being shifted to the citywide budget. This has been reduced in the amounts shown. This line reflects office furnishings needs across the entire city. I believe in the law department's budget hearing, I recall there was a concern about a spring in a chair that was deficient. This is the line item that those budget furnishings would have come out of, and as part of kind of the budget concerns, this line was cut from 60K to the amount shown 3,598. This is not office furnitures for the architecture division. This is the architecture division supports the purchase of furnishings, and it's accounted for within their budget.
You deserve a comfortable chair, Brian, but $60,000 chair, I don't know. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. Councilman Gilmore, Council President.
Just want to piggyback off of that. So the money in the architecture budget for furniture is for citywide furniture, you're saying?
That's how it was done in 2025, and that's what the $60,000 reflects, and that's what the corresponding 2026 request reflects. And as of right now, there's minimal amount of citywide office furniture purchases.
Okay,
They
and
were
I'm
built into
guessing
this
the
slide. Yes.
because that number in the 2026 draft is so specific, $3,598, I'm assuming that is close to what we've expended so far out of that line item.
Correct.
And I understand that, and I understand the cutbacks. I'm just a little concerned about supplying furniture for the entire city for the remainder of the year on that number. But, okay.
So I'm just trying to get clarity. So citywide, why would infrastructure be responsible for citywide furniture?
This is a finance department question. I'm happy to take it back why historically it was put under this department.
When is finance round two?
We're trying to nail down a date for next week.
Okay. I mean, I'm interested in,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Can we add that to the list, BA Ruby, to look into? Because I think we've had furniture line items in other budgets. So I just want to verify that infrastructure is supposed to be taking care of the whole city on that amount.
maybe
Yeah,
it's
I can-
office infrastructure, not the roads, the office, the infrastructure.
We can circle back with you.
And again, in the past, architecture was always involved with any kind of improvements to any office. So furniture was usually added onto that, just speaking from experience. And it's nice to have one place where you would do that. I don't know if the council wants to make a change. I'm just letting you know, but the history has always shown that architecture has handled purchasing of office furniture for the entire city.
Okay,
Wait,
thank you.
so-
The question,
Can we
it's-
move on from the furniture unless,
just want to clarify that we just want to make sure that other department did not have the line item for furniture. Just one department is responsible. That was the only question. We do not want to change anything, I believe.
As the BA said, she will confirm with finance to answer your question.
thank you. Moving on, our next division is engineering. Council President, did you have any questions for engineering?
No.
Thank you. Councilman Gilmore, did you have any questions for engineering? Just
Engineering, not
engineering,
Well-
traffic engineering is next.
Yeah.
They're two different.
Oh,
We can-
it's just-
yeah, traffic.
Okay, no.
For engineering, we have a number of new hires that are not being budgeted for 2026. The variety of positions, principal engineer, engineering aide, supervising engineer, another engineering aide, clerk one. If you can just explain the kind of work that we're losing out on without these new hires, and if you had your druthers and were able to get at least some of these positions, what else would we be empowered to do in the infrastructure department?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can respond to that. I think some of the workload that is not being advanced due to some of these other positions that were requested, it would include, I guess, additional oversight and advancement of some of the grant work, the design work. It would include additional capacity to complete site plan reviews for planning, something that's not being done as much. It also allow
Say that
opportunity.
last part again, I'm sorry.
Certainly. Site plan reviews, when a site plan for a development is submitted through the planning department, engineering, as well as transportation are review agents where they'd review and comment on those. It would give us opportunities, additionally, a responsibility could include updating the city design standards, various levels of age and dates to those. So I think those are a lot of the key responsibilities of the engineering department. Drew, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think we've talked about pavement management and, pothole repairs versus trench repairs. It's just added capacity to, have more eyes on some of these projects to make sure they're restored properly, or, just passing by if a trench was done and it is failing, that we can be more readily getting into contact with those contractors and get them out on site, because ultimately they're still responsible for their trench until final pavement. Certainly things, we used to have an environmental engineer on staff that would assist with a lot of these different, either city-owned or outside responsible parties that are remediating sites, to follow up with them and make sure that they're doing their due diligence. And additionally, like Andy said, updating our standards, is something I would love to do and dedicate a lot of time to, bolster everything that we do in the city and make sure things are restored properly.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to ask about, welcome, Peter, to Jersey City. Could you just explain the accounting of replacement for Ms. Wong, to prorate at 6 months? Like, where was the previous directors? Where was that in the accounting here, and how? I'm just a bit confused on how the Peter's new salary is being accounted for relative to the replacement.
Sure. Just to clarify, Peter's under the traffic engineering role?
No,
I'm sorry.
That's what I was trying to show
Oh.
you. Go sit down.
Councilman Gilmore had flipped my chart over, so I'm going to hold on to that. I apologize.
I'm happy to respond to that whenever the hearing chair would like me to.
Okay.
Councilman Effers asked my main question on engineering, but as a follow-up to that, I do notice that line item 314, professional services, is $740,000, and overtime has been slashed to nearly nothing, only $2,500, down from $20K, while we have these 5 positions unfilled. Would it potentially save money to fill one of these engineering positions? Would it potentially save money on professional services contracts, or is that not how they're set up?
Sorry, Councilman Little, I just want to confirm I'm understanding. You're referring to the engineering division line 312. I believe that reflects a request of $750K and expense about 740. Is that?
Sorry, yes, I misspoke.
Okay, now I just want to make sure. So and I believe the question, as I understood it, is if we reduce if we were to hire instead of professional services, would there be a net savings?
Yes.
The answer is both yes and no. I think there may be instances where, like our general on-call for engineering, we would not need some of those professional services if we built the in-house capacity. But I also, similarly, the site plan, we have budgeted for professional services. However, there's other things where we may not have a full-time employee's worth of work who is a licensed site remediation professional, LSRP.
Right.
We may need access to one. We may not need a full-time's worth of professionals' work in some of these other technical areas. So I don't believe that a full hiring of staff would eliminate the need for professional services in an engineering department, but it may reduce it.
Right. So if we were to hire one of these, if we were to give you guys money for one of these positions, we could potentially reduce the amount of professional services, that line item of 740,000, by more than the amount of the new employee.
It is potential. Right now, we currently have 2 vacant positions posted for the director and the supervising. One challenge when we talk about what a municipal or a city engineer does, they really are kind of jack of all trades. They have site plan, they have drainage, they have all different types of experience. So depending on the specific candidates and the individuals and their backgrounds and expertise, will kind of determine exactly what on-call support is needed based on their strength. So and that's an unknown. So in general, yes, but the specific amount and whether it will be beneficial really kind of depends on our ability to attract and retain qualified candidates for the vacancies we have.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Moving on next to traffic engineering.
Yes, so, traffic, am I good?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's only 4 of us now, so we can just ask our questions.
Yes.
We don't.
So traffic engineering, I think this is where Peter, the Director of Transportation, correct? So with respect to Peter coming in, can you, speak a little to his roles and how or in what way will this help facilitate, communication, expediting things and things of that nature?
Absolutely. And Peter, pay attention. So the role here for the Director of Traffic Engineering, there's a number of things that happen here. We identify a number of different programs and improvements through the Vision Zero planning, through the quick build programming, having oversight and ensuring that they're built to engineering standards, that they're designed properly, are things that we need an engineer to do. That's something this division will do. That includes signal timings, that includes safety upgrades at traffic signals, that includes pavement markings, that includes signs and work orders. Those are kind of more technical scope. Additionally, Peter and Lindsay collectively are going to work closely together on transportation policy and site plan review from both a planning and an engineering perspective. So there's a lot of value added in terms of advancing the Vision Zero goals, seeing things advance to construction. And one key thing is just providing oversight. The last administration, we had our pavement marking contractor, and they were reimbursed for refreshing faded pavement markings across the city, which is their contract. But they were not necessarily given direction as to which pavement markings needed refreshing. They kind of identified something faded and they said, okay, we'll fix it and then submit for payment. And that's not, we've corrected that. We since have someone in our engineering department providing oversight. And we've clearly communicated that, they will only be reimbursed for work as directed. If they see something they think needs refreshing, they need our permission and direction first. But those are the types of oversight that will create efficiencies within some of our other contracts and efforts. Additionally, Peter's going to be coordinating with DPW and other divisions to help streamline processes for work order implementation and coordination. So,
Well, I'm
and
gonna
sure
work
there's more.
Peter too. Peter, I'm gonna get your number.
Yes, I'll feed it into the record right now. No, I'm just kidding.
If you guys, speak to, the different type of professional consultant services, you requested 250,000, and then in the draft subsequently is 300,000. So if you could just speak to that.
Absolutely. 250,000 reflects both what was requested and inclusive of 250 of the 300,000 represents a traffic engineering all-call contractor. Prior to us having a traffic engineer, they were doing all of the engineering work. So they would look at, if we requested an all-way stop, there's an analysis, data collection analysis needs to be done. The only capacity we had was utilizing that 250K contract. It's meant to be an extension of staff. We've heavily leaned into it previously, and we will retain them now that we have Peter to be an extension of staff.
Okay.
The
So-
$50,000, the reason it's been increased, it was an oversight when the budget request went in that there's an additional $50,000 contract with a doctor that supports the ADA Parking Review Committee. So when someone submits an application for a reserved parking spot on their curb, a doctor reviews the medical conditions submitted and makes a recommendation. That cost of that doctor performing that work is about $50,000 a year and has been added to the traditional traffic engineering contract and collectively represents the $300,000 you see.
So bringing on Peter will essentially reduce this line item for next year.
I don't believe so. I believe what bringing Peter on will do will allow us to more effectively do more with this $250,000 contract. Because he will be giving them oversight in addition to the work that he himself will be performing.
I don't know what order we're going in anymore. Okay, so for traffic engineering, many fatal and serious injury crash sites, including 6th and Jersey and Ward E, have yet to see rapid response or quick fix or quick build improvements. When can we see left turn calming at 6th and Jersey and other safety improvements at sites of major crashes? Furthermore, curb extensions and flex posts throughout the city have been destroyed without replacement. There's also demand for green infrastructure, whether planters or curb extension rain gardens. Many intersections have safety improvements consisting of just white painted lines. And many flex posts are missing where they should have been, resulting in things like people parked in the line of sight or in the bike lane. What is the needed budget to fully fund flex post daylighting to fulfill demand? Is that included in the $250,000 contract? Are we able to regularly obtain planters? And what is our path to funding permanent infrastructure like rain garden curb extensions? Sorry, that was a lot of questions in one.
Is there anyone you want me to start on first within that?
Through 'em.
All right, and please keep track. If there's any I missed, I'll follow. Please follow up.
Thank you.
Let's start with flex posts. One thing that this administration has done, we've worked with DPW to build the capacity where DPW can now install, we call them delineators, flex posts. They can install them. That is not something that previously was done. Previously, we used our on-call road striping contractor, and that's for the budgeted conversation under line 314. We would use them to install, and we'd also have to use them to replace. DPW now has the staff capacity and the labor and the training and the ability, and we've been working closely with Director Fonseca and Director Levy about prioritizing where to put the delineators we can purchase. However, we're still utilizing our road striping contract to purchase the delineators. So the purchase of the physical devices are within the budget line here. We've ordered, I believe, 2 pallets so far this year. And for reasons that I cannot fully explain, our contractor is having challenges with customs and procurement of getting more pallets delivered on the time frame we'd like them to. So as delineators are able to be provided, we will be working to continue to install them throughout the city. This winter has been rough, both on our pavement as well as our delineators, more so than a typical winter. So there's a number of challenges, but our division is working closely to support the procurement of the physical devices, prioritizing them with DPW, who's now able to install them, which is a much more cost-efficient way for them to be installed than through our contractor. I think that addresses delineators. Some following crashes, providing safety improvements. We're currently in conversation with the law department. I think at the risk of being a little academic, we want to put safety improvements ahead of where the next crash will occur. And we can help understand and identify where the next may occur by looking at risk factors of where they have occurred in their past, not necessarily the exact site of a single crash. We do also want to show a responsiveness to the loss of life and serious injury of people in Jersey City. So we are looking at programmatic ways, and we are including crash histories and risk factors from past crashes as a key factor of our high injury network, which is used on where our improvements and quick builds go. We are also working with law to make sure that we are focused on doing that kind of risk-based and using, because that is going to get us more effective return on our investment in terms of reduced crashes and safety by following risk factors and patterns, as opposed to playing, almost whack-a-mole to where the latest crash occurred. So that's our strategy, and I'm happy to go into more details offline about kind of some of those factors and what we're doing. But we are both responsive and cognizant of those crashes, of those tragedies, of those fatalities and serious injuries that we are putting a lot of effort into preventing and doing it in the most cost-effective way by looking at risks, not responsiveness. The next item I think I saw was kind of hardening. A lot of this comes down to $2, right? And time. Quick builds are quick builds because they are quick. And quick is a relative term, but for us, that means, within a year, right? Or as quickly as we can. We have a lot of these on contracts. We can have a lot of responsiveness. We're able to do 100 locations this year because they are quick builds. Things that are hardening, and also harder, things like a concrete curb extension, a bump out. Those often the way drainage on roads work is there's a crown and the rain falls on the road and the water flows to the curb and it flows along the curb to the inlet. When we put a bump out, it now will prevent the water flowing to the curb to the inlet that may be on the corner because we're putting curb there. If we do that without addressing the underground utilities and the drainage, it creates other, ponding, pooling, and then freezing. It creates other problems. So to do a lot of these hardenings, they have kind of a trickle down impact of what needs to be incorporated into that project, which both has costs and time frame. We have been committed to expanding concrete curb extensions, for example, at locations through our grant program. When we receive funding for a grant, we utilize, this is one of the key treatments that we put into those grant programs in those corridors where we can. Additionally, as development applications come through and as we are able to review them, we are requesting bump out extensions to be installed by those developers. So those are ways in which we are utilizing existing funding streams to incorporate and expand the number of roadway bump out hardenings as much as we can. In addition to that, there's been, a desire of this department, of this administration, to rethink our repaving program for future years, to not only pave curb to curb as it is, but to think about those as opportunities to improve the road for safety. So as part of that, we're currently at the early stages of envisioning future years where instead of just going into a road that needs repaving, we can repave it and install other infrastructure that provides safety, including rain gardens. And a lot of this also will turn into the very unsexy conversation of design standards. As we start to look through and update our design standards, which we will hopefully get more capacity to do, that will allow us to kind of more standardize a vision of what we believe these hardening aspects should be across all projects.
Great.
Did that answer your question, Councilman?
Yes, thank you so much. Councilman Efros?
Okay. Now I will get to the accounting question I was asking about earlier. Again, welcome, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around the two different line items or lines within the salaries and wages line item around replacements and two different ways that the prorated 6 months salaries are laid out. EA, if this is a finance question that you want me to just email, I can certainly just email that and figure it out later if it's too complicated to ask.
Yeah, I think that's the best.
Okay, I'll take that offline then. Then I wanted to just ask on 102 for the part-time salaries, is this typical to have part-time engineering aides? Is this a position that is normally and preferably full-time? Are these either of these positions ones that the division would consider extending to or offering full-time hours to?
So these positions and the specific individuals in these positions are, I believe, this is the arrangement that works for them. And they are valued employees and perform a strong function and are able to do so in this arrangement. So I believe this is one of those, it's working for both parties, so we're not necessarily looking to make a change situations.
I got it. I appreciate that. And then in line item 314, this is obviously the kind of like standout number. I understand we're moving money from the capital budget to properly account for it. signal and maintenance and road striping are the two justifications and comments listed in 314. Are those the only two services that are going to be accounted for by the 300 plus million?
Yes. The $2 million represents the signal maintenance contract. So the way that works is we have, and the contract, because it's a lot of it is on call, so the amount actually billed to us is relative to how much work, how many signal knockdowns, how much work actually happens throughout a year. So we have a contract capacity that exceeds the $2 million budgeted, but we've seen historically the use of this contract. We looked at past billings and we've budgeted what we believe represents the amount of work that they have performed in the past with some additional buffer in case it's a busy year. So that is where the $2 million reflects. And then the 1.316, that dollar amount is partially funding our road striping contract. With finance, we went through the different things that contract installs and kind of identified what we believe is capital, what we believe is operating expenses with finance's guidance. And then we estimated a dollar amount to that. So this is representing the non-capital portion of the road striping contract.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little surprised to see how expensive road striping is, but that's.
And I mean, if it's helpful, Councilman Efroth, road striping is not the same as like the paint that we put on our wall. Road striping is meant to last multiple years. It has retroreflective beads so that when you're driving with headlights, it reflects that light back at you. And it's much more expensive material, thermoplastic or epoxy, with kind of some of those properties than, you know, traditional painting would be.
Okay, thank you. And we feel confident we're getting the best contract we can, best bang for our buck here.
The contract has been procured through an RFP. I don't remember the last time it was, but by putting it out to an RFP, that is the way that we try to get, you know, ensure that we get the best bang for our buck.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Council President.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to transportation, we can go in the opposite direction now. Council President, did you have questions on transportation?
No, I'm good for transportation.
Thank you. Councilman Efros?
Yeah, I would just ask about the vacancies and new hires. If you can just explain the kind of hopeful work that we can get done if we had these vacancies and new hires filled in transportation planning.
Sure. Yep. Again, not talking about people and positions, but the work we want to do. Absolutely.
Sure. So what we would like to do with the departure of the former director, I've now been promoted to that position. A team member on our team has been promoted into my position, and now there's the backfill of that. So, you know, among the things that we're doing are now moving into implementation of the master plan. So thinking about how we take those priorities, start to set policy and strategy and concepts for projects, building those out, and then working with traffic engineering to then deliver. So there are some things that we mentioned in the budget presentation, things like site plan review that we've just almost essentially paused. So we have a backlog of about 50 applications probably that we haven't been providing comments on. So staffing that up will help us to be able to deliver more of those sorts of programs and policies. And then the engineering aides that you see, those are actually interns. And those are, you see some grant offsets in the budget. We do have a grant through our NJTPA, the regional MPO. So that helps us to fund intern positions as well as offset some of our staff salaries.
Understood. The grant offset looks like it would cover both of those interns, but only one is being budgeted for.
We have some flexibility in terms of the hours. You know, we're looking for flexibility. So there might be one person who's able to work a couple of days a week, and depending on the semester, they might stay a semester, they may stay a full year. We think we just need one at a time. And then the grant can be used for staff. So if we don't spend it on intern, we can just use it towards full-time staff offsets. So the grant is very flexible in terms of which transportation staff it's actually funding.
Okay, thank you. And Council President, I know you did have a question.
I
as well.
apologize. I did have a question. For the vacant principal planner position, my eyes are merging together. Let me make sure I'm on the right line. Yes. It looks like we're not calculating for it in the workbook. And it should be an addition of $3,150.
I'm sorry, just to make sure I'm on the correct line. You're saying the draft is lower than the request?
There is, the draft column isn't calculated at all. So it just looks like it was just skipped.
I believe I'm looking at the Excel. I believe that number is, if you look at the last line, it says grant offset NJTPA, and there's a negative number that.
Got you. So that's the same number. Okay, so
Correct. So
that's
it's
being funded through there.
correct. That's how that's being reflected.
Okay.
Councilwoman.
Can you explain what the professional services contracts are for this division?
Yeah, it's very similar story that we talked about for engineering and for traffic engineering, but it's to expand the staff capacity of this Department of Transportation Planning. This has been shifted a little bit this year to support both the transportation planning efforts, data analysis, data collection, but also to have a focused contract for community engagement. That's a commitment of this department and something that we are looking and continuing to expand capacity for.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to sustainability? Close it out?
Let's go.
Cool. Okay, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Can move. Or,
Um,
yeah, we started.
oh.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Okay. I can't figure out who's going first. Okay, so sustainability, this is a very lean department. Director Diamond, it's you and one employee, and you had another employee who was not backfilled. That would have been a program analyst, and I know in the past you have spoken to me about your desperate need for an environmental engineer in your department. If you could fund one additional position, because this is such a lean department, there's two people and you do so much work. Can you speak more about what work is not being done because of the lack of filling that third position, and what you could do with a third position, and in an ideal world, what you would like that position to be?
Hi, sure. Thank you for the question. I would say that it would be, my priority would be to backfill the sustainability manager position. What's happening right now is that I have, as you stated, we have 2 employees actively working within sustainability. Myself and a forester. The forester is managing almost every aspect of our tree planting projects, which are almost exclusively grant funded. So with them focusing on those aspects, my role has expanded to include all aspects of program management, project management, community engagement, grant management, like documentation management, all the sorts of managements. So by backfilling that position, which I think would be the most important position to start with, I would be able to have more of a capacity for like more to develop and expand more programs. Originally, we thought we were going to possibly get an intern to help out with that. That has taken some time, and there's a little bit of back and forth about that. So while it was baked into this budget, I don't know if we'll be able to get an intern for the summer. Maybe looking forward to the fall, having a little bit of help and capacity when it comes to managing documentation.
Otherwise, we are basically at capacity for all the work that we're trying to do. What I would love to see is to expand on programs. One of the best parts about my job is that I get to work with, members of the community groups and organizations, SIDs, who have a lot of fantastic ideas. I would love to see different programs being expanded upon or created. And I think that would be like the next step and goal, rather than kind of just maintaining what we have today.
Thank you. And this is sort of a joint question for you and engineering. If the background, I know engineering is sort of the jack of all trades division, but if the backgrounds of any of the employees in engineering allow, I see there are currently a couple of vacancies. There's the chief engineer and the supervising engineer. And vacancies that are funded, if their backgrounds allow, would it be productive or feasible for them to dedicate some of their time to supporting sustainability's work?
Absolutely. A lot of our divisions, not only do we collaborate and share each other's expertise, but engineering, architecture, sustainability, because we are technical experts of those fields, even traffic, engineering, transportation planning, we support the needs of other divisions and other departments as it relates to our technical area. So without question, we will support Amanda's sustainability, we'll support the rest of the city government. Absolutely.
All right, thank you. And then my last question was on contractual services. There's a pretty big, and I also want to commend you on your work seeking out and getting grants. That is, for everyone who's been doing that, because it's very important and it allows us to accomplish a lot of things we wouldn't be able to otherwise. So I do want to commend everyone who's been actively going out there and getting grants. For contractual services, there was a reduction from your request from $500,000, and then the 2026 draft is just $30,000. And the explanation, the comment just says charge point. Can you explain, please?
The $30,000 reflects the electric vehicle charging repairs and costs incurred at the beginning of this year prior to the new contract being implemented. It reflects outstanding invoices. Moving forward, we won't have a cost. So that is why it's really reflective of historic expenses. I think Director Diamond can add more.
Yes. Director Kaplan is correct about the charge point, and we always request $500,000 for tree planting, which would go into the contractual services budget. That's historically where it's been put, unless it's put in capital. It really does belong in capital, so that's something that we try to request on an annual basis. I imagine it would be moving solely to capital for the foreseeable future, but we can definitely confirm that at a later date.
Thank you. I'd like to confirm it now, if that's okay. Director or Business Administrator Choi, is the intent to have tree planting, the trees, purchasing of the trees and the planting of the trees in the capital budget?
So we currently don't have a new capital budget to discuss at the moment. We have some funding left over from previously allocated capital projects that we are trying to prioritize for emergency repairs. But we are actively working on coming up with a new capital budget that I don't have a timeline for.
Okay, thank you. So currently with no new capital budget and the contractual services reduced from $500,000 to $30,000, that means we do not have any money set aside for tree planting.
Councilwoman Little, there are grants that we have, including a block grant that has already been set aside that we use for tree planting. And there's also the tree restitution fund that Amanda has access to. So it's not through operating budgets. And as Business Administrator said, the capital budget is still in the works, but there are funding streams at revenues. We are actively planting. I think we've planted 90 trees so far this year in the spring planting season, and there's plans to plant more in the fall.
We have currently, we have our community development block grant that we are finishing up. We're exploring options of spending more of the USDA grant for tree planting. And like Director Kaplan said, we have tree restitution funds that are going to be used for planting as well across the city. And we just applied again for another round of the community development block grant funding, as well as we applying for the Natural Climate Solutions grant funding. So we are supplemented with grant funding for tree planting, which allows us to be able to do that, complete that this year, and looking into next year and the following years, still looking for more grant funding. But so it wouldn't be coming out of necessarily this operating funding.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Efros?
Just minor question, because you've asked a lot of what was on my mind. On the program analyst who resigned on January 15th. Despite such an early resignation in the year, there's over 10,000 budgeted for that salary. If I could just get some clarity on 2 weeks of work at the beginning of the year.
I'll follow up with finance on exactly what
Thank you.
represents separation. I don't have that answer. That's a question we can follow up with you after we talk to finance on it.
Okay, thank you. And that's all from me. So, Council President. Well, mine was just on the program analyst who resigned, their salary being budgeted over 10,000, despite the very early resignation after 2 weeks into the year.
Okay, so it's the final dance. We're almost at the end of 2 weeks of budget hearing here. So I need you to walk me through the grant offset for this one here. So I see that the grant is offsetting the program analyst salary. So I get that. But in the drafts, we have an addition of 50,000. Is the total grant like 114,000, or where are we getting the 50 from as opposed to 2,300?
So this is a multi-year large grant.
Okay.
I'll defer to Director Diamond on it, but as it relates to offsets to other items shown, this is the amount of the multi-year grant which we are intending and budgeting to use during the 2026 fiscal year.
Okay,
It is
so that
both
50 might be the remainder of the total grant.
So I believe you see, I see what you're saying in the plus minus column. It's
Right.
1,000. That I believe may be an error.
Okay.
I believe that may
Might
be
have just been dropped down from.
an
the
error. I'm looking, it's not a calculated cell. I believe it probably should be reflecting the other. We'll talk to finance to make sure that it's corrected.
Okay,
But that grant offset of $64,000 is offsetting a salary, and there's an additional offset for an intern line shown.
got it. Okay, I see those two. Okay.
Thank you. Since we still have 6 minutes left, I did have a follow-up question on the trees. You said we've planted 90 trees so far this year with grant funding. And I'm just curious how many trees we planted last year and how that number might change if the city did provide funding for tree planting outside of the grant funding, whether in the operational budget or the capital budget.
While I wouldn't have the exact number, I believe we planted close to 200 to 250 trees last year. All was also grant funded. What the average cost of a tree to be planted in a city sidewalk right now is about $3,300, which sounds like a lot and is a lot. So what we're hoping to do is we've applied for funding from both the state and through the CDBG program to plant upwards of 500 trees respectively in both grants. These would be year-long or longer projects. And then looking forward, if we were to get what we always generally request, which is $500,000. That would be generally around like 150 trees, which I know is not meeting our standards that we want to set, which is closer to 500 trees a year. Since that standard was set, the costs have risen significantly, which leads us to having less impact with that much money. What I would like to say is that if we were to introduce it into a future budget through the city, this would continue to put in at least generally about like 150 more trees if we were to dedicate a yearly annual amount. That being said, we are also always looking for more opportunities with grant funding. We just applied for another grant. We'll apply again as soon as we find another grant. So that's been one of our strongest suits, is definitely grant funding.
Thank you. And I'm happy to hear that with the additional grant funding. You're responsible for planting the trees, keeping them alive once they're in the tree pits. That's forestry, right?
We have a 2-year guarantee for all trees planted through our projects, grant funded or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think with that, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, second.
So I have a motion to adjourn at 3:27 PM. Motion made by Councilperson Efros and seconded by Councilperson Little. All in favor of the motion to adjourn at 3:27 PM by acclamation, council members, please say aye.
Aye.
We are out of here at 3:27 PM. Thank you so much, everyone.